Hello dear viewers. This story follows Lytuky, a young woman carrying the pain of loss, as she embarks on a journey to uncover the truth about her biological parents. With the help of police officer Henry, she gradually exposes the dark secrets of the general, the man who once destroyed her family and covered up his crimes for years. In the end, justice is served, and Lytuky regains her faith in life. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel to follow the next episodes. Night gently descended like a velvet curtain over the suburban area where the mysterious mansion of the general stood. The dim light spilling from inside did little to dispel the chilling atmosphere that had shrouded the area for years. Henry and his three teammates from the Special Task Force moved silently through narrow alleyways, disguised as scrap collectors. Each man carried a sack on his back, eyes scanning every detail, ears tuned to catch any unusual sound from behind the mansion's towering walls. "He's tightened security," one young officer whispered. Henry nodded. Every path to the main house was heavily guarded. But what they were looking for might not be inside the house. At the end of the alley stood a rotting wooden shack, abandoned and forgotten. A portion of the roof had collapsed, and weeds had grown thick around the entrance. Guided by instinct, Henry carefully pushed the door open. It creaked harshly. The air inside was thick with the stench of mold and charred debris. In the center stood a rusted metal barrel, filled with half-burned documents. Henry crouched down, gently sifting through the ashes. Suddenly, at the bottom of the barrel, he found a thick folder, wrapped in an old plastic bag. He opened it, and dust-covered pages revealed bank statements, photographs, signatures, and finally, a line that made his heart tighten. Report of money laundering and property appropriation, complainants, Nguyen Dan and Tran T Mai. These are Lytuky's biological parents. Henry murmured, unable to hide his shock. The next page showed a stamped document from a past investigation, insufficient evidence, case closed. Scrawled in red ink on the side was a haunting note, all traces have been wiped clean. One officer spoke up, tension thick in his voice. So, her parents once tried to expose him? Henry nodded gravely. And when the law couldn't punish him, he chose revenge. The truth struck like a cold blade cutting through time. The general, now a powerful figure in the underground world, had once stood on the edge of ruin. But thanks to influence and corruption, he escaped justice. Since then, he had nurtured his grudge, turning it into a long-term plan of vengeance. Henry closed his eyes briefly and clenched the file tightly. He knew that bringing this to light meant reopening an old case, a legal earthquake that could shake down an entire network protecting the general. But it was also the only chance to deliver justice to Lytuky's family and restore what was right. In the shadows, Henry's eyes burned with resolve. He stood up, staring toward the mansion hidden behind the towering fence. The game is over, General. The truth is back. The room was silent, save for the soft hum of the old fan spinning slowly overhead. Henry sat at his desk, the folder of evidence open in front of him. Around him, his team members paced anxiously, their faces lit by the faint glow of streetlights streaming through the cracked window blinds. "This changes everything," Officer Min said, his voice low. Henry nodded. "We have enough to reopen the case. But we'll need to act quickly and carefully. The general won't sit still once he knows we've uncovered this." As they prepared their next steps, Henry's mind drifted to Lytuky. He hadn't told her yet. She deserved to know, but how do you tell someone that their parents were hunted, betrayed, and erased from history by a man still walking free? Just as he reached for his phone, a soft knock interrupted the moment. It was Lytuky. She stood at the door, drenched in moonlight, her eyes searching his face. "Henry," she said, her voice trembling, "I had a strange dream. I saw my father again. He was standing in the dark, holding out a notebook. He kept saying, 'Find the blue box, it's the key.'" Henry blinked, stunned. He hadn't mentioned anything about the investigation yet. Could it be instinct? A memory? "What blue box?" he asked gently. "I don't know," she whispered, stepping inside. "But I feel like it's connected to that place I used to hide in as a child. My father built a secret room beneath the floorboards in our old home." Henry stood up immediately. "We're going there now." The old house stood on the edge of the forest, a shadow of its former self. Weeds wrapped around the porch like claws, and time had eaten away at its paint and wood. But the air was thick with memory. Lytuky stepped inside first, her footsteps light and hesitant. Every corner whispered of the past, her mother's quiet lullabies, her father's warm laughter. In the living room, she knelt down, her hands brushing across the worn floor. And then, she found it. A slight ridge in the wood. With Henry's help, they pried open a hidden hatch. Dust billowed out as a narrow compartment was revealed. Inside, an old, battered blue box sat quietly, waiting. Hands trembling, Lytuky opened it. Inside were letters, photographs, and a leather-bound journal. Henry reached for one of the letters. It was addressed to Lytuky, in a handwriting aged but unmistakably deliberate. "My dearest daughter. If you are reading this, then something has gone wrong. Your mother and I tried to bring the truth to light, but we were silenced. We did not run out of fear, we ran out of time. The man they called the general is not just a criminal. He's a system, a shadow that is spread through every corner of power. But I believe in you. One day, you will find your own truth, and when you do, don't be afraid. Fight. You have our blood. You have our heart. With all our love. Father." Lytuky clutched the letter to her chest, tears streaming down her face. Henry placed a hand gently on her shoulder. "He wanted you to know the truth," he said softly. "And now, we do." Among the documents was an old cassette tape labeled, Testimony, generals meeting with investors. A recording. They stared at each other. This was it, the final piece. We'll need to get this analyzed, authenticated, and secured immediately, Henry said, his tone shifting from gentle to sharp. Lytuky nodded, wiping her tears. No more running. My parents tried to protect the truth. Now, I'll protect their legacy. As dawn broke, casting golden light through the broken windows, Henry and Lytuky stood side by side, two souls once broken by the past, now rising from its ashes, ready to face what lay ahead. The sun had barely risen when the team gathered in the makeshift operations room. The air buzzed with tension. This was no longer just an investigation. It was a mission to dismantle a legacy of corruption and bring justice long overdue. Henry placed the cassette tape on the table. This, he said, contains the general's voice in a private meeting, discussing plans to silence whistleblowers, Lytuky's parents. If we can verify its authenticity, it's the smoking gun we've needed. The forensic tech, Kwon, nodded. We'll clean it, enhance the audio, and match the voice with known samples. It'll take time, but not long. As the team worked, Henry turned to Lytuky. Her eyes were clear now, no longer clouded by grief, but sharpened with determination. I want to be there when you arrest him, she said. Henry hesitated. It won't be safe. I'm not asking for safe, she replied. I'm asking for justice. Hours later, they had what they needed. The voice matched. The tape, authenticated. Even more damning, timestamps and investor names confirmed multiple crimes and cover-ups. With the judge's signature in hand, Henry's team moved out. The general's estate was surrounded by high walls and guarded like a fortress. But this time, they weren't scrap buyers. They were the law. The main gate burst open. Officers in tactical gear stormed in, neutralizing guards in seconds. Henry led the charge, eyes scanning the mansion as his voice echoed. General Din, you are under arrest for conspiracy, obstruction of justice, and crimes against the state. In his luxurious study, the general stood calmly, dressed in a crisp suit, a faint smirk tugging at his lips. So, you found it, he said. Henry stepped forward. Your past has finally caught up to you. The lies, the threats, the murders, they're over. You think arresting me changes anything? The general said with a cold laugh. I built this empire. People depend on me. Take me down, and chaos follows. But Lytuky stepped forward, holding up her father's journal. You didn't build anything. You destroyed families, ruined lives, and called it power. But your time is over. For a moment, something flickered in the general's eyes, recognition, maybe even regret. But it passed quickly. Do what you must, he muttered. Handcuffs clicked around his wrists. The nightmare that had haunted Lytukai's life was finally being dragged into the light. Later, as the news broke across the country, people gathered in shock. The mighty general, brought down by a girl he tried to erase, and a policeman who chose justice over fear. Henry and Lytuky stood outside the courthouse, watching the chaos unfold from a distance. "You were brave," Henry said. "I just followed the truth," she replied. "It was my father's path before it was mine." He looked at her, admiration clear in his eyes. "You've given others the courage to stand up too. That's more than justice, that's healing." Lytuky smiled faintly. The pain in her heart would never fully disappear, but today, it felt a little lighter. As the first raindrops fell, she turned her face to the sky. "For you, Mom and Dad. We did it."